Hello, welcome to another set of weekly thoughts from the book of Nehemiah. Believe it or not, this is the third time that I'm trying to film this video because the doorbell keeps going. So let's hope I can get through it this time. In previous weeks, I know I split down Nehemiah 2 into two different sections, but this week we are going to just do all of Nehemiah chapter 3 together. So if you haven't read Nehemiah chapter 3, please hit pause, go on, read Nehemiah chapter 3 for yourselves, and then come back and watch the rest of this. But if you're going to keep watching, let's assume that you have now read Nehemiah chapter 3. So, Nehemiah chapter 3, essentially, it's a chapter that lists what work is done on the walls and the gates of Jerusalem. And it lists like who did the work and where the work was done on what particular parts of the walls. Now, this could be considered to be a really boring piece of scripture. And when it comes to pieces of scripture like this, I've heard people say, "Oh, I couldn't read it. I didn't connect with me. I wasn't led by anything. I didn't particularly get anything out of it. It's not practical. It doesn't give me any direction." But we need to I want to encourage you to stop. Don't think that. Okay, even with chunks of scripture like this, because actually every word of the Bible is God breathed. Every part of the Bible has a purpose in our lives. No word of the Bible is unnecessary. And so actually, none of this is unnecessary. All of Nehemiah chapter 3 is still God breathed too, written for us now, God's living word. Remember, each person named here was a person who was key in rebuilding the walls and the gates of Jerusalem, reviving the town. Each person counts. If we were one of these people, we want people to read this chapter too. But yes, okay, I admit it's not a very exciting piece of a chapter of the Bible. But for me personally, this is an incredibly beautiful piece of scripture, an incredibly beautiful chapter. Anyway, going, but Steve, why? Why do you think this is so beautiful? In this chapter, we see the extent of some of the work, well, the extent of all the work that needs doing in Jerusalem. We read of how many sections of the wall and the gates need work. And not only that, but we read how many people it needs to do that work as well. And we read of each individual who joins Nehemiah in the work of God to rebuild the walls. Remember, this started in Nehemiah chapter 1 with one person, Nehemiah. He heard the report and his heart broke. Nehemiah shared his heart with God. It became Nehemiah and God together. One became one in God. Then Nehemiah shared his heart with the king. And the king released Nehemiah and gave him resources to go ahead and do it. And it became then two and God on this journey. But then he also gave, the king also gave Nehemiah troops for his safety. So what was two and God became some and God on this journey. And Nehemiah kept stepping out and he went over to Jerusalem. And when he got to Jerusalem, he talked to the officials and the priests, the people he needed to talk to, and he shared his heart with them. And suddenly what was some and God became many and God. And then these officials and everyone that Nehemiah spoke to there shared the heart again with the people of Jerusalem. And what became many and God became many, many, many people and God. If Nehemiah had stayed on his own and hadn't shared his heart, it would have just been him doing the rebuilding of the walls on his own. We see in chapter 3 just how much of the walls needed work doing. This would have taken Nehemiah on his own decades. What we see in chapter 3 is we see what happens when God breaks our hearts for something and we step out and we keep sharing our God-given broken heart, our God-given vision with others, our heart, our passion that God gives us with others. What happens then? People join us. People join us on the journey with God and people work together for God's vision to revive a land. And for me, there is something incredibly beautiful about this. We read of a group of people who have captured the heart and the vision of God and are working and serving together for the revival of that community for God. They are united by God's vision for them. And remember, not all these people were builders. They didn't let their skill set exclude them from the vision of God. We have perfume makers, priests, cupbearers, officials, and everyday residents all rebuilding the walls. This was everyday residents working together in a single effort, together in unity for God's vision for their community. What a beautiful thing that is. I mean, I'm so grateful for all who serve here at Riverside in different capacities. We are looking at Riverside as we continue to move forwards together to be a Christ-centered people, a people who cares for others, a people that reaches with compassion, and a people that connects to each other in and for Christ. People serving together to see out God's vision for us at Riverside. People who want to see this community revived for God. One of the things that God has laid on our hearts in this really challenging time of coming out of a lockdown and a pandemic is still to reach the people of Bewdley. And we launched the coffee shop Just Love at Clementines in the middle of a pandemic, but God made a way for that. And as we've shared our hearts, people have joined us on that journey. And I'm so grateful for all who have joined us on that journey through Just Love at Clementines. Because we're seeing the people of Bewdley, people we weren't connecting to before, being connected to people for Jesus. Customers come into that place and know there's something different about it. Because they're not just having good conversations, but they're having God conversations in that place. Something we weren't necessarily doing that way before. I want to encourage you all. God will only be seen and heard through Just Love at Clementines if God's people are there to speak, show, care, love, and sow those seeds. I love how many people are sending their friends, why don't you come? There's a coffee shop and we're beautiful. Bring them, come with them. Have those God conversations yourself. We need to make sure that it's got Christian people in it to share and talk of that love of Christ as well. So thank you to all who have been part of it, but I encourage you, be part of it. Just like the people in Nehemiah Chapter 3 who work on the wall. It might not be their natural skill, but they all got involved. And there's nothing more beautiful, for me anyway, than God's people working together for his vision and his purposes. We're just starting to regather in person at St George's Hall on Sunday mornings. And it doesn't work without a group of people who help and serve to make that happen. The car park team, the welcome team, the worship team, the setup team, the cleaning team, all of those different teams make that happen. And they serve so we have a space where we can gather and glorify God together and worship God together. And I am blown away by these people. On Sunday morning, just gone, as I was looking around the room and seeing different people serving and talking together for this united purpose, it warmed my heart to see God's people serving together to make something happen so we can glorify and worship God of all ages. And I feel this is a challenge for us all. Where are we serving God's vision here at Riverside? Or if you're not from Riverside, where are you serving God's vision in your church? Nehemiah chapter 3 shows me that reviving the land doesn't happen by simply attending. Reviving the land happens with us all serving. And when we do that together, it's a really beautiful thing. God has work for us to do for our community in our churches. He does. There's so much work to do. Jesus even said the harvest is plenty and the workers are few. Let's all be part of this beautiful thing. God's people serving together, working together for the revival of our land for him and his purposes. Will we work and serve in areas where God has already given us an opening? Because if we won't, why would God give us any more openings if we won't serve where God has already made a way? Nehemiah chapter 3 is being played out here at Riverside. But just like in any church, we could always see more. Remember, stay safe, stay connected, look after yourselves, look after each other, and we'll see you soon.